Many people, including myself, would say that Kurt Russell has earned himself tenure as an A-lister. He's pretty much done it all. He's been the hero with one eye, he's been the hero with two eyes, he's been the villain, he's been the cowboy, he's been Elvis, and he's been Santa Claus. Kurt Russell has been acting since the age of 12 and has a long list of films on his resume, but I've narrowed it down to what I think are his 10 best. I'm Anthony DeJoya, and this is Movies Never Say Die, your home for 80s and 90s retro content, and today we're taking a ride back through the filmography of the ever-cool Kurt Russell.
Land of voodoo and hoodoo and all kind of weird shit.
We had nuns protesting outside when I got here this morning.
Nuns?
Yeah, I had to have Jen turn a fire hose on.
It's not like having a bad day selling log cabins. You have a bad day here, somebody dies.
Coming in at number 10 is a flashy crime thriller with touches of humor as a group of ex-cons rob a casino during an Elvis convention in 3,000 Miles from Graceland from 2001, also starring Kevin Costner, Christian Slater, Courtney Cox, Kevin Pollak, and David Arquette. 3,000 Miles to Graceland is just one of those turn-of-the-century films that feels like a down-and-dirty 90s action thriller, but with all the additions of the highly stylized action sequences that we've come to be familiar with from the early 2000s. I enjoy the unique feel of this story. Sure, there are a handful of genre cliches draped over this plot, but it's still a blast of exciting, violent action and dry humor. I think the cast in this movie kicks ass with familiar faces, even down to the smaller characters. Then you get Kurt Russell and Kevin Costner battling it out as the driving force of this high-energy action thriller. I think Costner is awesome as this Elvis-loving criminal that will double-cross anyone to come out on top, and Russell shines as a throwback to the 50s and 60s with his hair and his wardrobes. Russell delivers his charm, and when the story ramps up, he carries the vibe of the action lead perfectly for this pulpy noir film that you just don't see made much anymore. Coming up next at number 9 is an action-packed thriller set on a plane. Kurt Russell plays an intelligence analyst that will have to save an airliner after it's stormed by terrorists in Executive Decision from 1996, also starring Halle Berry, John Leguizamo, Joe Morton, and Steven Seagal for about 10 minutes. I've always loved Executive Decision. It's pretty much a Kurt Russell parody of a Jack Ryan movie, but it doesn't get in the way of this film being a great time. It's a basic plot and it follows a simple structure, but it works through all the tropes with a lot of skill. The writing is structured to elevate the tension while still delivering high anxiety doses of suspense along the way. The supporting cast are all able to infuse these routine characters with their own personality and vibe, from Leguizamo to Morton to Platt. The ensemble cast in this movie is great. Then you get Russell and Barry front and center, just playing cat and mouse with these terrorists, and despite all the familiarities of Executive Decisions, it's still a great time. Russell plays the reluctant hero with ease, and despite all his antics in this story, there's still a grounded charm to his character that makes him the common man in an uncommon scenario that this movie needed from him. We're going from suspense and action to light and humorous for my number 8 pick, a fun-loving comedy where Kurt Russell plays a raggedy carpenter. Co-starring would be Goldie Hawn as a snooty heiress, and they would accidentally and comically find love in 1987's Overboard from director Gary Marshall. I've always loved this silly little romantic comedy that's just a timestamp to the genre in the 80s. Overload packs plenty of mean-spirited humor and heartfelt charm in its runtime as Russell pranks this heiress after she stiffs him on the bill for a job. The plot of this movie is just ripe with potential for comedy, and through the sense of humor in Dixon's writing and just the undeniable chemistry between Russell and Hawn, Overboard is one of those timeless comedies from the 80s. I think Russell is as hysterical as the rough around the edges Carpenter with a lovable sincerity under all his antics, and Han is just laugh out loud funny as this snooty heiress that ends up taking care of Russell and his wild band of kids. You just can kind of laugh with this movie, and when the story turns to the dramatic punch to make this couple work, it's just sappy, lighthearted cinema from the comical lines to the sight gags and all the physical humor. Overboard is just a feel-good flick that always delivers when you hit the play button. Next up at number 7 is a gritty cop thriller from Ron Shelton. Here, Kurt Russell plays a corrupt LAPD detective who finds his life spiraling after a convenience store homicide triggers a series of events that causes his past actions to finally catch up with him in 2002's Dark Blue, also starring Scott Speedman, Ving Rhames, and Brendan Gleeson. Now, I'm a huge fan of cop thrillers, and I particularly enjoy Dark Blue primarily because I love seeing Russell play out a character as this just dirty, conniving cop. He plays the generational cop. He's kind of an old school gunslinger playing in a new school world. He breaks the law to uphold the law, and Russell is awesome in this movie. You don't like him, but you kind of like him enough at least to just ride the waves of tension that this story delivers as his character just finds all of the shady activity from his past coming back to haunt him. Dark Blue is also set in the early 90s on the eve of the LA riots, and the movie just moves and feels like a 90s cop thriller. It's a movie that gets ugly at times, the violent hits with just a brutal realism, and I think it manages to interconnect a large collection of characters very well to keep the intrigue high and the information moving along as the story progresses. It's a bit methodical in the first 2 acts, but when the shit hits the fan in the final act and Russell's desperation increases, the result is a closing that really does stick the landing, in my opinion. Moving along to my number 6 movie is one of my all-time favorites. Here, Kurt Russell plays a fast-talking, rough-around-the-edges cop named Gabriel Cash, who alongside the clean-cut cop Ray Tango are framed by their arch-enemy in one of the last action movies to come out of the 80s, Tango and Cash from 1999, also starring the action man himself, Sylvester Stallone. Tango and Cash is just a buddy comedy action movie that absolutely thrives on the chemistry between Russell and Stallone. They're just fantastic together on screen. I wish this movie would have gotten a sequel. I loved Stallone since I was a kid, and I can admit his weak spot is comedy, but just playing off the comedic timing of Russell in this movie is really able to pull some of Stallone's most humorous work. Tango and Cash just has that 80s action vibe with a ton of dumb jokes and endless bravado and big action. It's just a delightful ride of macho awesomeness. Russell easily holds his own next to Sly as he kind of plays a riff on Martin Riggs. His rough character just pairs well with Sly's clean-cut persona, so you just get plenty of odd couple banter, and when the action kicks in, which is frequent, Tango and Cash delivers 2 solidified action stars going to work, and it's just a nostalgic blast to the era of 80s action spectacle. Hitting the middle of my list, and we're heading down to the Antarctic for my number 5 movie about a research team that is just decimated by a shape-shifting alien that can assume the appearance of its victims in 1982's The Thing from John Carpenter, also starring Keith David, Wilford Brimley, and Richard Masur. I remember watching The Thing so many times as a kid, and while I'm not a huge fan of body horror movies, I do enjoy this gem from Carpenter. It's a moody, ominous movie. The Arctic settings are just perfect for creating a tight, claustrophobic horror thriller. This movie boasts a great ensemble cast, but I surely think Russell just commands the lead with ease when he's on the screen. Russell is just visually intense from start to finish in this movie. He asserts control, and the result is just a grounded, badass character that you can connect with. And sure, the memorable parts of this movie are when this creature is wreaking havoc on this crew and when the visual gore is ramping up, but to me, the moments between when Russell and company are scrambling for their lives are when The Thing is at its best, and with Russell in the lead, it just all kind of gels. Coming up next at number 4 is a grounded but highly effective thriller centering on a couple on a drive across the desert who are separated when their car breaks down, and a common man, Kurt Russell, will stop at nothing to find his wife in 1997's Breakdown, directed by Jonathan Mostow, also starring J.T. Walsh and Kathleen Quinlan. Breakdown is just one of those grounded thrillers with a plot that feels like it could really happen to anyone, so naturally you can subconsciously invest that much more in this story as Russell fights to find his missing wife. This is one of those movies where at first glance all seems normal. These characters feel like people you've crossed countless times in your own life, and if you've ever driven across the desert, you can relate to the isolation that these characters feel, but as it evolves, you soon realize nothing is what it seems. Breakdown also has a quick, highly engaging pace. It doesn't try to overdo it too much. Russell delivers as well a knockout performance. From the highs to the lows, you really do take this ride with him. You can easily sit down for this movie and feel the suspense and the helplessness of Russell's characters and his experiences, even on a rewatch. And really, when you look at it, Russell dives into this character with a ton of emotional intensity, and it's perfect for this story of a man on a mission to find his wife. We have reached the top 3, and coming in at number 3 is another certified 80s classic and easily Russell's most iconic character. Manhattan has been turned into a prison, and when the president crashes on the island, there's only one man that can save him. That man being Kurt Russell's Snake Plissken in John Carpenter's Escape from New York from 1981. Snake Plissken is easily Russell's most iconic character. He's cool in this movie from start to finish, rocking his Under Armour tights and his eye patch. He has a constant serious demeanor. He's dropping one-liners and constantly cool under pressure, just soaking in the scenery with every pose he makes in this movie. Plus, Escape from New York overall is a unique and wildly eccentric ride. So when you sit down for this movie, you truly are taken to another time and another place. The dated effects have a nostalgic charm to them all these years later, and the cast is impressive, but it all comes back to the kick-ass performance from Russell, who I don't think gets the credit that he deserves for his action turn here. Most generally credit Willis as McClane and Die Hard as kind of being that introduction to the grounded hero, the guy with a normal build that relies on his moxie and his killer instinct, but I would say Russell delivers all of that in this movie, and he adds some of that Eastwood Dirty Harry intensity to his dialogue delivery that will just leave you with a smile on your face every time you watch it. Now, my number 2 pick was just one of those 4-quadrant summer blockbuster movies for Russell. I'm talking about Backdraft, directed by Ron Howard, with William Baldwin, Scott Glenn, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Rebecca De Mornay, Donald Sutherland, and Robert De Niro co-starring in a fireman drama that just captured the imagination of the entire country back in 1991. Now, I'm sure I love Backdraft more than most, but if you remember this movie when it was released, it just took the world by storm. It's one of those movies that just delivers the full spectrum, from action to grounded humor to family to suspense to sentimentality, all draped over a strong undercurrent of drama. This movie just killed it at the box office. It's a complete package. I think it has a fantastic star-studded cast, and shining bright amongst them all is Kurt Russell, just delivering a raw, emotionally intense performance as a hardened firefighter that just sees his life in shambles outside of the fire. Backdraft is just filled with great performance and just fun, melodramatic storytelling with impressive practical stunt work and fire effects that really make this movie look just as impressive today as it did back in 91. But despite all the quality aspects of filmmaking that Backdraft delivers, it's all cemented by the performance from Russell, who knocks it out of the park as this severely broken character that, despite his flaws, is a hero at the core. Now, before getting into my top pick, I have a couple of honorable mentions, and the first one would be 1992's Captain Ron. Russell is hilarious in this movie as a comical version of Bodhi from Point Break. I just love the silly adventure of this movie. I think Martin Short is great in this one as well, and this is just one of those feel-good comedies that I often turn to when my day's taking a dump and I just need a boost of positive energy. My next honorable mention is also from 1992. I love Unlawful Entry. It's one of those street-level thrillers you can really connect and engage with, which makes the tension and suspense even more effective. Kurt Russell and Madeline Stowe are fantastic in this movie, but for a Kurt Russell list, it's a little tough to consider this one since Ray Liotta really just completely steals the show with a truly sadistic performance that on its own kind of is what makes this movie great. And for my number one pick, my favorite Kurt Russell movie, I have the mystical action adventure comedy kung fu monster movie. It's of course Big Trouble in Little China from 1986, of course directed by John Carpenter, with Kurt Russell leading the show as Jack Burton, everyday anti-hero, driver of the Pork Chop Express, and philosopher on the CB radio. There's just something about listening to Jack Burton drop knowledge on the CB radio and watching him flounder his way through Big Trouble in Little China that will just always be near and dear to me. This movie delivers waves of cheesy 80s nostalgia, tons of high energy action, and a buffet of quotable lines from Russell, who just shines as the anti-hero. I've always loved this movie. I certainly think the comedic pulse of this story is the result of just the jovial performance from Russell, who is just fantastic as this unrefined truck driver with hyper levels of self-confidence. I actually think this could be Russell's most amusing performance, and his ability to stumble through this mission on the action side while still making it entertaining is just a credit to his comedic timing. Then you get all the insanity of this movie wrapped around him that really is a timestamp to the era in Hollywood when studios weren't afraid to take a chance on something completely out of the box, and all of this makes Big Trouble in Little China a timeless classic and Russell's best movie. And that's it for this video breaking down my picks for the top 10 Kurt Russell movies. He has many other great movies like Soldier, The Best of Times, Tombstone. I'm just not a huge fan of Westerns, and so many others, but these are my personal favorites. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments what some of your favorite Kurt Russell movies are. I'd love to hear what some of your selections are. Thank you guys as always for watching. You guys are the best. My next video will be coming soon. I hope to see you guys all back for that one. And until then, movies never say die.
This is Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?